Welcome to A More Perfect Region. I'm your host, Jeff Webster, co-chair and senior advisor at the Pittsburgh Futures Collaborative. The Pittsburgh Futures Collaborative is a nonprofit working to make southwestern Pennsylvania the first region in the world where every individual can reach their full potential and thrive. On the A More Perfect Region podcast, we're talking with collaborators and innovators working towards a more perfect region. This week, James Fogarty is joining us. James is a great friend and the executive director of A+ Schools. A+ Schools advocates for Pittsburgh's children, focusing on supporting schools to improve so our students will be prepared for college, career, and life. I can't think of any organization with a mission more aligned with our mission of helping every individual thrive. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So, first of all, if you could start off just telling us a little bit about what your partnership has been with the Pittsburgh Futures Collaborative.
Sure. We were looking, I became executive director around 2016, and we had been trying to find a direction where we could be more supportive of improvement and reached out to you and Christina, right? Dixon, who's also with Pittsburgh Futures Collaborative, to talk a little bit about what would it look like for us to go on this journey of trying to improve not only our own organization, but how as an outside organization that had been seen as an independent watchdog, right? And that's what we were founded to do, become more of a support, right? And so I think for the past it was prior to COVID, we've been working together with Christina, getting coaching for us internally about how we might pick a North Star. But, the COVID pandemic and the work we've been doing kind of really focused us on how do we get kids just to show up to school? And if we use that as a North Star, how do we get other organizations who have supports, whether they be in housing or health or transportation, can help us do that for kids whose barriers are multiple, right? And so for us, it was, how do we use this idea of continuous quality improvement? How do we create kind of a North Star that's at the limit, right? You guys talk about this all the time, like setting North Star at the theoretical limit. And I hear you guys a lot in the work I try and do, right? So it's like we're trying to make the city a place where 100% of kids show up 90% or more to school every year. And we're about 3,000 children away from that right now, about 20, and we're trying really hard to get that number to zero in partnership with schools. And so I think the journey has been 6-7 years, I would say. We've done a ton of learning, and my team and the folks we work with now are starting to learn more. So I think for us, we see ourselves, I don't know, I'm not going to say we're like a founding member, but I think we exist, our partnership existed before Pittsburgh Futures was written down on the back of a napkin. So, we've been along for this ride and very glad to be part of the journey and part of the collaborative.
I think that's why I mentioned a close friend and a close partner, because you've certainly been a collaborator all along. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So if you could share a little bit about how you lead differently, personally, based on the work with Futures.
Yeah, I think some of the readings that you all have suggested have been really helpful in my thinking about respect for human beings and how at the core of what a journey around improving an organization or improving outcomes for folks is respect, right? It's respect for the folks you serve. It's respect for the folks that do the serving with you. And so when I think deeply about what it is that kind of been a key lesson for me, it's about how do I set up an organization, whether it's its processes or systems, the stuff that's boring, right? But like the stuff that really matters if you're not wasting people's time. So I constantly think about, did what we do respect people's time? Did what we do respect people's contribution, right? Am I showing enough gratitude, not only for my own team, but for the partners that we work with? And did what we do respect those that we serve? Did we see the assets that exist within the schools and children and families that we are trying to serve and trying to make an improvement for, and the teachers? And so when I think about our new mission and how we've kind of aligned it, right? As a watchdog, there's times where you're not that respectful, right? You're barking a lot. You're saying, hey, this is a problem, fix it. But when you stand in that different position of like, hey, problems are hard. This is difficult work. Why don't we work together? And how about I start by listening with some humility, knowing that you've been trying to move the needle on a problem, whether it's third grade reading, whether it's attendance, whether it's lowering suspension rates, whether it's creating safer schools. You've been doing that work as a staff or as families for a very long time. And so while I can have all kinds of fancy research reports that I've read and policy analysis that I've done, none of that matters on the ground to people unless we start with respect and start with that human relationship.
So foundational, and certainly some of the things that we've learned from Toyota and Alcoa and others who've created the most habitually excellent organizations in the world, start with that basis of respect. So really incredible to hear that story. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about how the collaborative in Pittsburgh Futures Collaborative has been valuable to A plus schools, and
Yeah.
and how you bring that to the table. You bring that to us as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, when we started moving beyond the four walls of schools, right? When you're a watchdog, you kind of say, all right, this institution, I'm focused on you. But when you start to say, okay, well, what if we were to shift to focusing on children and families that happen to live nested in multiple institutions and are served well or not well by them? That shift really meant that we had to have partners. And so one of the things that Pittsburgh Futures has helped us to do is grow what we're calling the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative. And we've had lots of conversations and discussions around what would it take to collectively impact this wicked problem of attendance, right? You could, think about that in lots of different ways. So I think Heidi was doing, training, gold training at the city. And so she was like, hey, we'd love to have you come sit along and learn some of these principles, improvement principles with city workers. Okay, so that conversation starts. And then we start looking at issues at one school, right? An issue around children having to walk in the middle of the street to get to school, not safe at all, right? And we know Pittsburgh Futures is all about safety. And, so what I did was raise this up to Christina and Heidi and said, hey, kids are having to walk in the middle of the street. Is there any way? And the sidewalks aren't being fixed because folks are broke in this neighborhood and they're barely paying their property taxes, let alone having extra income to fix sidewalks. So kids have to, kind of navigate this in an unsafe way while cars are zipping around them. Is there anything we can do? Well, it happened that the city was already thinking about how do you prioritize schools in your areas where you're going to pilot some things so that kids can get to school more safely, right? So it's like there's this little synergy between the two. And one of the areas that we were really focused on, the school Arlington, we were able, with the city's support and Pittsburgh Futures collaborative support, to get this idea of like 100% community safety really aligned well with how do we get kids to school safely, and how do we make that walk easier so that now we had sidewalks built over the past couple years in places where, one, there wasn't a sidewalk, or two, where cars were blocking things, or there was debris or branches in the way, right? And so the city has really prioritized those safe routes to school. And I'd like to think we had a part to it, but it is just a part, right? Like, because city was already on that journey thinking about safety, thinking about how we prioritize children and family safety. But because we worked together, there was a clear opportunity to show what a difference you could make just in a year. And we were able to then keep the focus on, okay, let's get kids to school. And so we've seen reductions in chronic absenteeism. And we posit, based on what happened kind of pre and post sidewalk, about 10% of the reduction in chronic absenteeism in Arlington is due just to sidewalk repair and fixing, right? Having an easier pathway to get to school, having an easier way to drive it in, huge for getting kids there. And just in terms of what we saw pre and post, that those have been some improvements. So yeah, we recognize that this work of removing barriers to getting to school can't happen just because we wish it to happen. We need partners. And Futures Collaborative has been a great group of folks where I can pick up the phone and say, hey, we're trying to solve this problem, and you guys were already working on a safety problem in the city. We were able to kind of work together to get this done for kids up in Arlington. And by the way, not just Arlington. Kids at Langley got benefit. Kids in Homewood that went to Faison and Westinghouse were benefiting. It was kind of across the city. Kids in the Hill District that went to Miller or Weil benefited as well, right? So it was a pilot, but that was really focused kind of across the board on areas where things were pretty bad in terms of our streetscape for kids. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a great example on all directions. Again, us being able to pull on partnerships with you to learn where the problems were and what to solve, and you being able to turn to us and some of our partners, including the city and others who are thinking about how to solve parts of that problem. And it's not until those parts all come together that you actually produce the real value and also the result that isn't necessarily something you would think about first.
Yeah,
Of chronic
100%.
absenteeism, when you're thinking about fixing sidewalks, that's probably not the first thing you're thinking about, but it helps create additive results all around.
Well, again, it's that idea of like, how do we get to a root cause of an issue? And when I'm always surprised at some of the stuff that you uncover when you just keep asking why. You're like, well, why didn't kids show up today? Why did parents decide not to drive their kids? Why, if they couldn't drive them, why did they say it's okay to stay home? Right? Like you start to see, put these things together. One piece of it, not the whole entire picture, but one piece was it's not safe to walk there. Right.
Yeah,
And so, especially for a kindergartner where we saw higher rates of absenteeism for our kindergarten folks, like you get it. If especially mom or dad is like, I gotta get to work, you gotta get yourself to school. You're 5, 6 years old. Maybe there's an older brother or sister that might take you, but if you can't, you might just stay home with grandma if grandma can't walk you up there. Right. And so I think those are things we start to learn as we unpack these problems, and we probably get to solving some of those root cause issues faster because we also have partners like you to be like, hey, I'm not quite sure what this is. Can you help me think through it together? So just having a thought partner to bounce things off of and a coach for us to say, okay, but is that really the root? Right? Like why again? Like what else could we be learning?
absolutely. So, the last question you answered a lot of this, but I'm curious if there are other examples of value that you've been able to produce in your organization based on your work with futures.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we recognized was we're a pretty flat team. There's only 7 of us, and then I've got like 3 or 4 consultants. And there's not a ton of hierarchy, but we also were meeting too much, right? Like, and when there's not a lot of hierarchy, sometimes you can meet too much. And one of the things that Christina really coached us on was around having a management system of like what needs to be accomplished at what meeting and who needs to know what within an organization so that you can continue to move the ball forward. And I think restructuring both our meeting agendas, the way we took notes and assign tasks. I mean, again, it sounds simple, but like for us, it was about like, how do we respect each other's time and not mean that everyone has to be in every meeting, but throughout the organization, people understand a learning that might have happened in a different part of the organization. So how do we structure the organizational conversations so that they are a place for us to learn from each other? So our monthly staff meeting has become a real nexus of learning. And then we have bi-weekly program team meetings where folks who are more on the ground doing the work are able to kind of get into the brass tacks of the nuts and bolts of it day to day. But having those two structures wasn't intuitive, didn't happen overnight, but the way we structure the agendas, the way we decided to learn, and the way we decided to continuously improve, right? Every quarter, we're running PDSA cycles on certain goals. We're still not good, I think, at setting goals that are the best, right? Like they're kind of amorphous. They're still vague. We're still working on getting better compared to 4 years ago. We are so much tighter in terms of is the work we're doing aligned to a goal or an outcome that we really want to achieve? And how do we know? Right. And so that quarterly work, that's stopping and spending time to learn and then valuing learning within an organization. I think for so many of us, you get to this point where you're like, I've got to do all these things. I've got a grant that I've got to report to. We don't have time to stop and learn. Well, what we found is it's just like working out, right? Like you're like, I don't have time to work out. Well, you end up being less productive if you don't do that. Well, we're less productive if we don't take this time to stop and learn. And so I've seen our growth in terms of impact and our ability to build partnership just grow exponentially as we take these quarterly stops and say, what did we learn? And then monthly, we're doing similar kind of smaller scale work on that as well. So it's been a huge boon to us. And I think it's made us better at knowing where we go. The other thing we did, and again, this may seem standard to folks that are at Toyota or other places, but for nonprofits, it isn't always. We started building some standard operating procedures around what it is we do and writing it down. And just saying, okay, like whether it's a back to school like set of activities that we do where we make maps, we recruit volunteers, We build out a script, we get folks, we were doing all of those things, but not writing down, okay, and we did this for what purpose and what did we hope to see as an outcome, and putting those hypotheses in before we go and do a thing makes us better at knowing and being able to learn from it. And so those are shifts that I think for a leader, they're small, right? They don't take a ton of energy, effort, but they do allow us to say and reflect upon, like, did what we do get us where we want to go? And if not, what do we think was the reasons why? And what would we do differently? What would we just stop doing? The adopt, abandon, adapt kind of sets of strategies that we weren't kind of reflecting on before.
Absolutely. And what you're describing is really embedding the scientific method in how you do your work,
100%.
having plan, do, check, act cycles that help you learn. And the great thing about that in organizations is whether you succeed or fail in something, you learn and then you can adjust. And so many organizations get stuck in they only learn from the successes and they don't learn from the things that don't work, and then they end up repeating. So that's
Yeah,
such a great example. And we always preach and we believe fundamentally that there are enough resources out there to do everything that we need to do, but we waste a lot of them, not by intention, just by what you were describing, meetings that don't go where you want them to go, and goals that are unclear and actions that are unclear. I think what you're describing is how A Plus Schools has created a management system that embeds the scientific method that's enable you to strip out some of the waste and do more value added work in your work. Is that accurate?
100%, 100%. I mean, I think what I see and then it also allows my team to grow, right? Like, because everyone's learning, and it's not necessarily professional development, though we do have folks going to take, professional development, but it's so much more aligned with, here's a thing that I'm seeing in my own practice or in my role that I'd like to learn more of, and be more expert in. And my data person, he comes out of campaign work, comes out of doing door knocking, and analyzing lists for purposes of winning elections. But that's a little different than analyzing attendance data and moving things forward. He's done so much learning over the past few years and able to coach now other people. And I think that's the different, I mean, that's the piece around this where it's like we become both teachers and learners constantly to each other. And what I think the piece for us that's also allowed me to kind of lower my anxiety around the fundraising, right? As a nonprofit, we have to fundraise, is like, if I can be very clear with my funders, I'm going to learn 100% of the time. I may not get the outcomes that we wanted, but I can tell you why we didn't with some degree of clarity. And we will continue to learn more about why it worked or didn't work. And this idea that we can learn from failure, even while seeing success, I think resonates with folks who are really, at the end of the day, trying to solve these really wicked problems that we see in our communities that are getting in the way of children and family thriving.
Absolutely. So, James, what's your proudest accomplishment from this work so far?
Man, there are many. All right. So there's like a near term one that I'm super proud of because it took 3 years of relationship building to get to. And then there's sort of the larger, bigger picture one. We started working with Arlington pre-K to 8 a while ago, right? We had done some work with Perry High School to learn with staff about what a plan for their ideal school would look like. And we got some wins there in terms of partnerships and other things. We started working with Arlington. They had a rate of chronic absenteeism for an elementary school of about 65%. This is really huge, right? Most of the kids missing a month or more of school, super problematic for their learning, super problematic for the long term. So started this work, relationship building, did a year, made a plan, had 3 clear focuses in the framework, continued to like be there, supportive. This year, over the summer, the principal says to us, I really want to build systems that will get my kids better, get kids better resources, what they need, what they want. And so we started exploring with her, what would be a thing that you'd really want for your kids? And she said, look, I would really like this to be a school where there's no fights. And so with support from our team and building with that principal who was really interested in how might we do this work, Pittsburgh Futures, Christina helped us like work with her to do a morning huddle. And it's just a routine every morning, 15 minutes, the school support staffs, which includes a project manager who does restorative practices with the school, the counselor, the social worker, the principal, and the assistant principal. And they take a walk and they talk about areas in the school where something might happen. They talk about staffing issues and where they might need support, and making sure that that's communicated. They talk about what happened the day before if something wasn't going well and what they might do differently to support that and get ahead of it. Last year, this school had 57 fights over the course of the year, right? So you're averaging over the 10 months of school, about 5 to 6 fights a month. So far this year, we're 4 months in, we've had 2. That type of work, again, we aren't really doing the work. Right? Like A plus schools isn't the hero in this story. What we've done is help facilitate a leader's ability to recognize and learn and figure out a time that works, right? It's 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day. But doing that has opened up time, right? Principal told me the other day, she's like, my inbox is 0 now. I'm getting ahead of problems now. I'm able to see the things that we didn't see before. And we're starting to say, okay, we recognize that Mondays are a day, if there's a holiday on a Tuesday, where we need to get more things in. So they're being proactive about working with us to get folks like the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild in and doing something fun, right? Because they want kids to be engaged. We're seeing safety burgeon in this school in ways that it hasn't before. And the staff, many of whom were skeptical when we first started, many of whom were like, I don't know if this is ever going to work, are now starting to come to these meetings. We have between 10 and 15 staff members that come every Wednesday morning at 7:30 to talk about attendance, right? They're doing that in part because they're also seeing these other things change. So that's a huge win in a short amount of time that took about 3 years of work of relationship building, of showing up, of being there with and learning from and listening and being supportive, to finally get to a place where the leader's like, yup, I see what you guys are doing. I see that these methods that Alcoa, Toyo, others have used might have impact here. Let's try something. So that's a huge win. I talk about it all the time because I'm super proud of Principal Crystal Caldwell and the work she's done. And I'm super grateful to Christina and the work that Pittsburgh Futures is doing to help us facilitate that kind of conversation within the school. The second big one is just the fact that we've been able to reduce chronic absenteeism by about 3,000 students from its peak coming out of the pandemic. When we compare ourselves to other cities like Cleveland, Indianapolis, Philly, Pittsburgh has one of the lowest rates of urban chronic absenteeism coming out of the pandemic of any of those cities. We just saw a little bump up though. So, that's part of learning, right? There's progression. Progress isn't a straight line, kind of goes ups and downs. So we're trying to learn from what happened last year and really double down on our school partnership process. But yeah, those are kind of my 2 favorite stories that are really related to the work and wouldn't have happened without being part of the Pittsburgh Futures Club.
Yeah, those are such great examples of habitual excellence where you start with key things that respect people and help people learn very simple management and habits that then start to drive a whole bunch of different measures. So just fantastic results, and look forward to learning with you for more of them. So last question here, what's your most profound learning from this process so far?
I was thinking a lot about this question, and I think for me, and I don't want to make it seem too spiritual or woo woo, but I do think there's something profound about letting go of this idea that you have to know the path that you're going to take before you get to the outcomes you want. And this idea that we can be humble and learn together, and that is actually sufficient to start the flywheel of improvement going. The idea that perfection is actually an enemy to improvement, and that we can be very human in this process. A process that, again, when you kind of first hear about it, again, I was an American Studies major. I was a lawyer. My wife's the engineer, right? Like Six Sigma black belt stuff. Like she's got her black belt. She's been on, assembly lines and making medical devices for years. Like this woman is amazing. But I always thought that was sort of it's businessy stuff. And it's actually profoundly human what we're trying to do here, which is understand that the problems that we face are in a lot of ways about not respecting each other at a fundamental level. And then to me, what's been the most profound it's and we can actually learn together how to solve these problems, that they're not unsolvable, that they're not intransigent, that the things that we have said are too big for us to be able to solve, that you have to just pick the thing and hope that it's the silver bullet is actual bull. It's bull. And and that we do kinda have to do everything at once. So how do we do that? We get really good at making sure the time we do spend on a problem is productive. We get really good at focusing on the metrics that matter, and then when we get them wrong, saying, "Man, I thought it was gonna be this. We thought we'd done enough work on the root cause. Turns out it wasn't exactly what we thought. Let's keep learning." Because the idea is, for me, to stay motivated on a wicked problem that we know is not gonna take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to solve. But to the point you just made, Jeff, that, like, there comes a point where all of a sudden things start to go much faster. We're getting to that point of things being much faster. And I'm just grateful to have partners like Christina, like Tracy Jackson, Will Tolliver, like all these consultants that kind of have helped us think about humanity, the abundance that we live in, and how together we're just not going to say it's okay to keep doing what we're doing by kids and families, especially those that are our most vulnerable in our communities. And so, yeah, it's, to me, again, I mean, not to end where we started, but fundamentally it's about respect.
Mhm.
And I wake up every day excited to do this work, to raise the funds, to support this team, because I respect that the relationships we're building and the folks that we get to walk alongside with are human beings that want the best for themselves too. And so we have this great opportunity every day to sit in spaces where we don't have power necessarily. I mean, it's not like I'm empowered. There's no like governmental agency that's given me power and said, "Hey, you're in charge of this thing." We're a set of community folks who said we can do better, and we're going to do whatever it takes to support those that are doing the actual work to do better by our kids and families. And so, yeah, I'm just so grateful for this learning around respect and sort of, and, you know, at its heart is just really love, right? That we love each other and we want the best for each other.
Yeah.
And that means learning how to do the work so that we can actually get better at getting better.
Well, James, those are profoundly important lessons across the board for all leaders. So I hope this podcast reaches many of them and gives them an opportunity to think about how to go down this habitual excellence path. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about the work of Pittsburgh Futures Collaborative, please visit www.pghfutures.org. You can also subscribe to our Substack and our podcast to stay up to date, and we have a LinkedIn page as well. So thank you very much for coming with us on this journey.